Claire, do you want to just start with kind of your entry in, how you got into telly?
Welcome everybody, thanks very much for joining us today. I hope you get something useful out of my experience. It was very lovely for Donna to say how great my CV is. It's only because I'm so old. When you've been working as long as I have and had the staying power, then your CV does become amazing. But it's interesting in the current climate, everybody talking about the gig economy and how deep the gig economy is in television. I was probably one of the very first of the generation to. I sold my car, moved down to London like Dick Whittington, and started writing letters to people whose programmes I liked. And the Broadcast Act of 1991 had just come into fruition, which meant that there was a big change in the way television was made, which allowed lots of indies to flourish, which allowed basically a freelance community to establish itself. So I started as a runner. I was thinking back to that. I started off, I had quite a strange journey in that the first job that I had was as a runner on a current affairs show about education. So for parents and teachers, that surprisingly went out on Channel 4 on a Friday night at 8:30. And the third series, I mean, it's amazing to imagine this now. And the third series wasn't commissioned because we didn't get 6 million in the second series. We only got, I think we got 5.8 million. 5.8 million people tuned in to watch a current affairs show about education. So times have changed considerably. So after that, and I realised quite quickly that the thrust of journalism wasn't what was my bag, and I used to get very funny looks from people. They'd still give me funny looks now I come to think of it. But I got funny looks from these journalistic types where I'd say, I just want to work with Barrymore. So I made it my, and that was one of the great things about the gig economy in those days, was the flexibility of it in the early parts of your career. So I then made my way and ended up working in a very huge game show company called Action Time, and that's really where I cut my teeth. And then there was some random years. The next big element in my career, I suspect, was when I produced and directed Pop Idol Extra, which was the ITV2, which was fairly unheard of at the time, an ITV2 spin-off of Pop Idol, where, I don't know, I suspect you're all quite young and may not even remember Pop Idol. You might even be too young for that. But it was a totally gobsmacking, in your face, changed what everyone was talking about, not just in television, but in the whole of the country. And at Pop Idol Extra, our first episode went out on ITV2 with 26,000 viewers. And by the end of the first series, we peaked at 2.7 million viewers just on that one episode with our interview with the Pop Idol, who was Will Young. And it was an amazing experience. We just went from strength to strength, and that really just turned my career around. I suppose one of the things is, it's interesting that we're called industry greats. I don't really like that myself. It's not the way I choose. I wouldn't ever choose to call myself that, and it's not the way I walk in the world. But what Pop Idol Extra did was give me a presence to a wider community that I'd struggled with in the sort of, I'd been working, I think, about 14 years by that point. So that really did kickstart the second that second tranche of my career, and I did a lot of ITV2 spin-off shows for a few years, and then ultimately got the opportunity to go into ITV as a commissioner. Initially commissioning just on the digital channels, where I commissioned series on female serial killers right through to Celebrity Juice. Obviously, Donna's mentioned Towie. I worked on, I had the opportunity to look after I'm a Celebrity, Saturday Night Takeaway. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, I was there 10 years. It was an amazing experience. I left about it's about this time, 4 years ago. 4 years ago, and set up my own indie called Thunderclap, which I've had relative success with. It's bloody hard being an indie. I know that. I mean, it's bloody hard being a freelancer, and it's bloody hard being an indie, and it's bloody hard being a commissioner and a broadcaster, particularly in these times. And it's a bit annoying because I see it from every point of view, because I've done all these things. And I think that's, if there was anything that I could give you, it would be the circle of knowing that everybody's got difficulties, and that they're just different. When you've got different hats on, you've got different difficulties, and spotting them is probably really useful, particularly at the moment, I would have thought. Is that what you
Brilliant.
want?
That's a great overview. Thanks, Claire. So we sort of build this session, and I called these sessions Industry Greats. Obviously, people don't call themselves Industry Greats. I call them that. But we built this session as sort of 10 life lessons. And as Claire and I were talking about it yesterday, we were talking about we've all got to do less in the industry now. So actually, we haven't got 10, we've got 8. So please don't report us to Ofcom that if we don't come up with the full 10. But we're sort of starting to cut that. So let's go across that. As you say, you've got that circle of life in broadcasting. And a woman who's trailblazed in entertainment and comedy, and there's a lot of women running entertainment and comedy brilliantly now, but in those days was quite a thing for a woman to be breaking down those very male barriers. So kind of your first life lesson is around the word no. What's your advice there?
Well, I think no doesn't mean no. I mean, obviously in some contexts it does. I mean, I'm not suggesting that we don't listen to no all the time. But when it comes to jobs, I think no doesn't mean no often. It means not now. And I spent a good long part of my career. I mean, my background is very different, particularly as you say, to the world that was then 30 years ago. It was very much a male English public school scenario going on, and in fact in that education programme that I was talking about, there was only 2 of us that hadn't either been to Oxbridge or private school. I'm comprehensively educated, and I think, I mean, I don't know whether this whether it helps anybody out there, but the learning that lesson, no doesn't mean no, it means not now, I think was really helpful in me not just thinking, oh, I can't do this, which in my experience, and I don't know because I didn't go to private school and I don't know, but it strikes me that one of the big differences is this central self-esteem that having a different sort of background to the background I've got, and I don't have a bad background, I'm not suggesting that for a moment, but just not having that very privileged background, I think it gives you a sense of self-esteem, mettle. I don't know if they get taught not to take no for an answer, but I'd love everyone that wants to do something in this wonderful world that we inhabit to not think when somebody says to you, sorry, no, you're not right, you know, you're not right for this job, or no, I don't like your idea, or no, to not be overwhelmed by it, and just think, all right, they mean not now, that's not right for them now. I may write back to them in a month's time. I may, you know, like, but I'm not going to take this personally. This is about what they need. And interesting, I was talking about that circle. So that's very much as a freelancer. And certainly I get sent CVs, and people contact me as an indie boss, and you know, at the moment, you know, I've got no commissions. I'm sitting trying to develop stuff at my kitchen table. I don't have anything for anyone, so that's very much a not now. And then as a commissioner, I used to always make sure that because who am I to say that an idea is not right for somebody else? It would just not be right for ITV at the time, and not now, because, you know, there's millions of stories, not millions, there's a few stories of, you know, of people coming with ideas and people saying no, and then there being a huge big hit. So I think that that's a really important lesson.
Yeah. Somebody on the message board has just been said, I was once told that no stands for next opportunity. So yeah, look at it that way. That's great, isn't it? Brilliant. And lesson number 2, I've got a different phrase for it, but what's your lesson number 2? Taught to you by an old commissioner, old producer.
An old producer, I don't know. So, you know, there's been times in my career where I really didn't get very much work at all. My CV was very scant, and you know, I'd go and see old bosses to try and, well, get a job or advice or whatever. And the best bit of advice and I use it every day, literally every day, was given to me by Malcolm Gary, who, if any of you know him, he's a fantastic character. But and again, you might be too young for this, but really in seminal programme for me was The Tube, which went out on a Friday night at about 6 o'clock, and it was must-see, absolute music programme with Jules Holland and Paula Yates. Anyway, he was one of the producers of that. He ran Initial for years. He was a fantastic. He's from the Northeast. He's hilarious. Anyway, he taught me Shy Girls Get No Broth, which honestly, when you say it to yourself, it just helps you just sit up and say, oh, well, why will I not do that? I'm not going to be scared. I'm not going to be shy. I'm not going to let my insecurities make the best of me. I'm going to let them take me forward and push me forward. So I use that every day. It's really straightforward. I like it because it's sort of almost Scottish, I think, because it's from the Northeast maybe. But Shy Girls Get No Broth, meaning that if you don't push yourself forward, you ain't going to get any soup.
And there's another phrase that people use, isn't it, that telly's no place for wallflowers. And I think that's not to say we all have to be the same, but I think that's part of that. Telly's a networked industry, whether we like it or loathe it, it's always going to be a networked industry. And I think that whatever you're doing, whatever stage you are in your career, networking is critical, isn't it? Just to get out there. And it's the last thing you want to do when you've been logging away on a long schedule, but forcing yourself to join some of those organizations, go to some of those events, putting yourself in front of people, that networking bit is a critical bit of telly, isn't it? And I don't see it getting any less.
Yeah, and I think that these are lessons that I've learned along the way, that I do believe that if you're from a different background or you've got different experience, you might have seen these things happening. So your parents might have done these things, but my parents definitely didn't. You know, like that wasn't their world at all. So I think that they're really useful for helping us not the ceilings isn't quite the right word, but break our own insecurities. I think often these things are internal with more normal, for want of a better word. But you're right that television is a really social environment, and using your points of difference, I think, is a really powerful thing to do. And shy girls get no bra. I use in all aspects of my life, to be honest. Like if I'm trying to think of an example, but like when I negotiated with my builders, I've just had my flat done up. Beautiful. Anyway, when I was negotiating with them, sometimes I would think, oh, maybe I shouldn't say it, and then I'd think, no, shy girls get no bra. So you can use it in all sorts of ways.
And then, brilliant. I should imagine you've been shy much of your career anyway, Claire. But
I think it's interesting that, because I think because it's not necessarily shy. I think that insecurities and self-esteem are very different from shyness, and I think lots of people do battle with them, myself included. That's why these mantras and lessons are really helpful. So you're right, and I'm a loudmouth Scot, but that's the point of difference I've made about myself. That's not necessarily the internal dialogue that's going on.
Yeah, I didn't call you a loudmouth Scot, by the way.
Oh, I called myself that. Don't worry,
There's some other Scots in the audience, like Jerry, so they're very pleased. They didn't realise you were Scottish. There you go. So going on to your third life lesson, and this is something you say you wish you'd learned earlier in your career.
Yeah, I think, and it gets back to this sort of like your experience of life. But I really wish that I'd found a mentor early in my career, not somebody that was going to get me a job, not somebody that was going to, put not their hand in their pocket for money, but their hand in their pocket for something, but really just a sounding board, somebody that could advise me. And actually, I've done a lot of mentoring later in my career. I really enjoy doing it, and I always get something out of it. I'm just looking what notes I wrote. And you might have several mentors over your career. You might have several at one time. But I think the really key thing for me about it is don't say, oh, that person's my mentor. Ask them to be your mentor. Make it an arrangement. Ask them to help you with something specific. I've done several mentoring programs, and the ones that I think work best are the ones where we're tackling something specific over a specific period of time, and set an agenda. My sort of mentoring, and it wouldn't be everyone's, but my sort of mentoring is that I'm very methodical and give people homework and other people might not do that. But I think if you're specific about a particular issue that you want to address, or and you go to somebody and say, will you be my mentor? I want some help with this. It's a much clearer thing it's a much clearer transaction than, an old boss being kind to. So for instance, Malcolm wasn't my mentor. Essentially he is, because he's given me great advice, but there was no specific relationship where I said that. Whereas if I'd said that to him, I think that would have been much more straightforward.
Yeah. I'm back in the room now, literally. I think on the mentoring front, to people who are out there are lots of official mentoring schemes, the Women in Film and Television, run 2 a year. If you go on the ScreenSkills website, they've got a massive program to provide mentors. And then Edinburgh TV Festival runs some mentoring schemes.
And what does Creative Access appear from a different background from mine?
So there are lots of official mentoring programs out there, and some people are sort of wary about going on programs. I think, you know, as Claire says, the door is open to lots of sort of private little clubs in different places, and if that's your way in, then use that as your way in. But also, you don't have to be on an official scheme. You can ask somebody, and I think it's a very generous industry. Most people will do it, and depending on people in the audience where you are in your career, I think you should offer to be a mentor as well, because it's quite a rewarding experience. It's a sort of 360 experience, isn't it? So if you're in a position to offer to be a mentor, I think it's a really great thing to do, because it gets you knowledge as well. So I would offer to do that. But I think just ask somebody. And I think bizarrely, this time now is a good time to ask people.
Yeah, that's true.
I think commissioners and people who are running indies at the moment are flat out trying to keep the show on the road and keep their businesses afloat. But I think there are lots of other level people now who aren't as busy as they are normally. They really want to find a way to give back to freelancers at the moment, and they are sitting at home. So I think now's as good a time as any to sort of ask for a mentor. And I think you should have one. You know, it's a roller coaster. It's a sort of snakes and ladder career, isn't it? We should have mentors at different parts of our career, and just go and ask. Somebody's saying, what's a non-creepy way to approach someone? I think you can literally just say, I've been in some of these talks, lots of people are talking about the benefits of a mentor. I've never had a mentor before. I think, you know, this is a good point in my career to have a mentor. I've been following your work. I respect your work. I would like you to ask if you would consider mentoring me because of X, Y, and Z. And the thing about getting a mentor is, what do you want to get out of it? It's not necessarily, here's a commissioner in entertainment, or here's a person running an indie. What do you want to get out of mentoring? Is it to expand your network? Is it to build your confidence? Is it for public speaking? Is it to get in another genre? So what is it you want to get out of that mentor?
And I think the more specific you can be about that, the better, because expanding your network, for instance, I think is quite difficult to help somebody with. Whereas if you said you wanted to help expand your network in directors or in a particular genre or a particular, I just think the more specific you can be, the better.
Yeah, and just do your due diligence on somebody. If it's about, it might be about managing work-life balance or something like that, and just ask around and say, look, who do you think manages their work-life balance? Do your due diligence and pick a couple of people, and then just approach them. And, you know, it goes back to point number 2 or point number 1. The worst that somebody can say is no, or the worst is they ignore your email. But I think now would be a good time to ask. Oh, obviously what's coming in now is, will you be my mentor? So I'll take those off. I'll take those off offline. Okay, brilliant. Let's go on to lesson number 4.
So this is slightly counterintuitive, but I think because of the way the nature of the industry, and because it's a giggy industry, etc., I think we all spend a lot of time worrying about the next gig and the next step. And I meet people all the time who are just more anxious about what their next job will be, as opposed to the one that they're in. And I think sometimes that clawing up the ladder, I mean, that's not, I don't think that's what everybody does. I think it's the nature of being freelance. You've got to think ahead. But I think when you can, enjoying the moment that you're in. I mean, it's very Buddhist, isn't it? Be present, be in the moment. the more you're able to do that, the more likely you are to be good at your job. I mean, obviously, I think there are definitely exceptions that prove that rule, and hopefully those people will get found out, or maybe they won't. But I think that I got most out of the jobs in my career when I've been present and not thinking, where will this get me? Where will this get me?
Yeah. And what were your favourite roles? Because I loved being an AP and I loved being an SP.
I loved the thing when I look back. I mean, I absolutely loved almost all of being a commissioner. I found it. I loved the fact that you were right at the start of ideas, and I loved the fact that you were in the edit. They were my two favourite things to do. So it really, and and obviously having a lot of access to more influence and all those things, but actually the job was just about ideas and edits, making things better, and I absolutely loved doing that. Other jobs that I loved, I was a studio director on Pop Idol for 2 series, which I've not done since or before, and it was bizarre. I did music. I got trained in music directing and everything, and it was amazing. It was amazing, and I absolutely loved that, because that was about running. I loved the way that a team would come together. Like 40 odd people would come together in a day, and by the end of the day you'd be making a program, and it would be you'd have put all those people together, and sometimes the 40 people, maybe 15 of them wouldn't be different. Maybe 15 of them would be completely new to it, but you were able to all build this sort of teamwork that came together, and I loved being at the helm of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Somebody just asked me to repeat it because they dropped their hand. So basically it was about not being in a massive rush, just enjoying the job you're in and enjoying the grade you're in, because there's always learning because we move around so much, there should always be learning. And there's not to say that we're not going to have some bum jobs, because we obviously do, but just kind of enjoy where you are and not be in a rush, and you'll be a better person as you go up that ladder if you've learnt your craft and your trade. And then let's go on to number 5, which is about more to do with tech.
Well, this is a bugbear of mine, to be honest. It's the notion that when I was starting out, I had to send out individual letters, and I had to make individual addresses, and I had to find people individually. And nowadays, obviously, you just you're able to cut and paste and get in touch with 100 people at once, and that goes as much. Actually, the bugbear is not in looking for a job. The bugbear of mine is when research comes down to Googling and finding a few articles, and actually I think direct contact, both in looking for a job and doing a job, is really important. Research isn't just finding the first 3 pages on Google. It's about delving into that, and maybe even making a few phone calls. In my day, being a good researcher was having the ability to phone up people and talk, and charming them into giving you more information than perhaps they might have initially thought. And that kill, I'm talking about in sales speak, that kill was your bread and butter. And I think that sometimes it's a skill that's been somewhat muted with technology. So my advice is to just, and I'm a total geek. Well, for a woman the age I am, I'm a total geek. Most of you probably, hands down, know a lot more about computing than I do. But I think they're amazing tools, but I think sometimes communication, direct communication, is so much better. And I think that's been interesting about lockdown, is how amazing this technology is. This, to me, is a really, really good use of technology, whereas this is completely personal, but I've given up on all social media at the moment because I'm not interested in somebody shouting out something that they think and then seeing what other people think about it. I'm much more interested in direct communication. And I think that's probably ties into this idea of what I think is often overlooked.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more about picking up the phone, and I can see from the messages there's a lot of sort of new entrants here, so it's worth dwelling on it. I used to run training for the BBC, and I did this massive survey of about 250 indie chiefs and said, what's the one skill you want us to teach people? And it was how to pick up the phone. And I think we're used to emailing and we're used to texting, and sometimes if you sit in big open plan offices, it's just a bit weird, isn't it, to pick up the phone, and you don't want to hear people getting it wrong. But I think that personal touch, all that detail you'll get. And I don't want to sound like I'm just flogging courses here, but next Monday, we've got a workshop specifically on how you find your contributors, how you interview them prior to being on camera, and how you interview them on camera. And that is all about how you pick up the phone and how you structure your questions. Is there such a thing as a killer question? How you order your questions, how you get the best out of a contributor. And all of that is really on the phone. So that's a session that's coming next Monday in the afternoon, because so many producers and indie chiefs just say, please be able to pick up the phone. But we do understand that it is still a skill you're sort of doing it in public, aren't you, if you're doing it in a busy office. So people do need to be able to be taught how to structure those interviews, because there is a way to do them and get the best out of people as well. So that's something we're doing, yeah.
And I think it comes back to, like, you're not going to be great at it the first time you do it, and it's a skill to develop. I mean, my pet hate is when people say they've spoken to somebody when they mean they've texted or emailed them. It's like, no, you haven't. You've communicated with them. But I mean, that's me being an old lady. So back in my day, we used to phone people. But
well,
I do think it's really worthwhile.
Back in my day, you used to send a taxi or a Red Star parcel to people because you didn't have email and things. So, and if they wouldn't pick up the phone, you sent a taxi driver or a Red Star parcel or something to them to get them to talk to you, or you doorstep them. You just went and spoke to them. So yeah, it's critical. Let's go on to lesson number 6, which was about Edinburgh.
I'm just trying to. Oh yes, I know what this lesson is. So this lesson's got a story attached to it, and it's about networking and understanding what and who you're networking, what and who your network are. And I've seen some people, they are catching up with each other to have a WhatsApp group, I think, I don't know, and I think that's really great, because my lesson is that back in the day, I was one of the very first ones to watch at the Edinburgh TV Festival. And I wouldn't be impressed if I were you, because I think there was probably the 20 of us that applied, got the 20 places that there were. But it was an amazing thing. And one of the things I thought when I went on this 4 days before Edinburgh to do lots of masterclasses and this, that, and the next thing, I thought I was going to meet all these important people that were going to be important to my career, and that were going to be integral to me. And I did meet some fairly important, impressive people, but what I did meet there was a group of people, my peers, and having fun with them and sharing with them, and they were all from different genres, and we kept in touch, and that network actually was so much more important than what we think networking is. Networking to me at the time when I got on that scheme was to be talking to big chiefs and being impressive and saying the right thing, when in actual fact much more important was when I fell over in front of all my peers and everybody laughed, because that's a much more bonding experience, and that's what real networking is. So I think that in a nutshell is don't think network is equal to important people. Be very aware that your friends or your network. And somebody else gave me a really good advice a few years ago actually, which was to network with the people that you like.
Yeah, and it's kind of going back to saying networking is never going to go away from this industry, is it? And I think whether that's going to events or building those groups, and people recoil even at the word of networking, don't they? And I sort of say, if you get up in the evening and you've got a networking event and it makes you roll your eyes, it's best to just go, I'm going out for a drink and I might meet 3 interesting people that I haven't met before. And if you look at it that way, you don't build up this, oh God, I've got to go and be a creepy networker. But I think building that network of independent people that have your back through the industry is so important. It's a very brutal industry. It's a very isolating industry. You go to, quite often at indies, you don't have HR. You can't really sort of speak your mind, but having a group of people that know you of old and you can support each other, because you'll all be having your times of need when you can support each other. So whether that comes from a really good program, and there were programs, weren't there, like Jungle or Big Breakfast, and I started on That's Life, and 30 years ago, and we're still all in touch. You sometimes get that network on an amazing program, not as much these days, but you do get that. Or you join some of these associations, whether it's Women in Film, RTS, BAFTA, get some of those groups going and start them off in this period. I know lots of people are getting together to sort of develop and brainstorm ideas. And again, I suspect there will be groups of people who sort of come together as strangers during this period who will sort of have a really powerful, potent group at the end of it. There will be something really sort of solid. I mean, just seeing you sort of sharing your contacts and your names down the right now, if kind of 5 or 6 of you stick together through this, you will have something that kind of can take you through your industry. And you need that support. It's a really brutal dog eat dog industry, and you need a gang of mates that has your back. And I think if you see a network, if the word network sort of upsets you, see it as an amazing group of mates who'll be there when you need them and will tell you what's what when you need to be told that as well.
And another really useful thing somebody told me, suggested to me, was that don't always just look to your network for things that you want. A really good way of networking with people is sharing something with them that you think they might like, an article that they might be interested in, or, remembering their birthday, or offering something to them. Or in this day and age, and that goes back to my social media thing, that's all so easy, and I actually don't think that's proper communication personally. I'm an old lady though, lots of you will have just grown up with that, but I think that direct communication will really help you find people that will give you advice, give you support, that you can give support to, and that you can give advice to. And like we were saying about the mentoring, every time I mentor somebody, I get a lot out of it as well.
And it's something about having a favours bank, isn't it? I think don't always go back to someone for a favour if you haven't done favours for them. You should have credit in the favours bank, and that's not about, I'll only do something for you if you've done something for me, but you do have to keep that favours bank topped up, and it has to be a sort of 2-way relationship. Definitely. And then the number 7 was about what's the worst that can happen.
Yes, I think that this, so this has happened to me. So I was talking about Pop Idol and how amazing it was. and we spent 22 weeks and we made 100 hours of television, some better than others, I hasten to add. And we got to the end of it, and the whole way through, our whole shtick had been, and we'll be bringing you the interview with the pop idol as they're announced. And the day that Pop Idol was on air, the final, 9th of February 2002, was the day that Princess Margaret died, which is a little known remembered fact, and not really that important in the grand scheme of things, except what it did was it made the news longer, the bulletin before Pop Idol final, which made Pop Idol finish 3 minutes later than it was originally due to be billed to be finished, which made us come on air 3 minutes later. So I was like, well, this is our biggest show, and we were really, you know, we put ITV2 on the map. So I phoned up and I said, there's no way that we're taking 3 minutes less. Give us 3 minutes more. Give us 3 minutes more. We'd also asked for some extra time as well. So we were billed in the TV times and the radio times to be on air, I think from 9:30 till 11 or something like that. And definitely coming off air at 11. And we built up the whole show. And the idea was that we'd get everybody into the green room, which was this tiny little dressing room, and we'd get everybody in there, and then we'd bring Will in, and we did all that. And as we got to Kate Thornton asking Will his first question, I looked up at the monitor that brings back the transmission, so you see what's on television, and there was a black screen, and I was like, what's going on? I mean, like, honestly, it was the worst thing that could ever have happened. And basically I said to Kate, get to VT, so that we could work out what was happening. Nobody knew what went on. We went off air for 6 minutes before we came back on. And that's when we were at 2.7 million viewers, which was huge for ITV at the time. I think about 2 million of them stayed 6 minutes while transmission and everybody sorted things out. And we came back and finished the show. And it was a real lesson. I mean, it was just awful. It was, it was the worst thing that could ever have happened, but nobody died. It was awful. It was horrendous. But, here I am to tell the tale. It's a funny tale. What had actually happened, if you're interested, was, and this is funny, because it was in the very early days of ITV2, and the people that booked the lines, because you needed lines for the satellite to come out of Fountain TV studios to go to BT Tower, to then go to ITV, to then be transmitted everywhere. The lines had to be booked, and somebody had looked in the Radio Times to book them, and booked them till 11 o'clock. Yeah. So that changed after that. Once we'd worked out exactly what had happened over the coming days, we learned, now if I'm ever in a live situation, I will always ask the PA, have you checked the lines? That we learn from these mistakes, and I suppose it's the idea that, particularly now in the world that we're living in, what we do is really important. It's really important to entertain and inform and educate, like the BBC's meant to do. And I stand by a lot of, I think that celebrity juice is important because it gives people time to reflect and enjoy, and so I have no truck with that. But we're not saving lives.
Yeah,
we're not saving lives. So the worst that can happen is a black screen.
I've been caught out by a particularly frugal head of production that will cut you off on a live like that. So yes, so those are kind of lessons, but I was going to pick up some questions now from the floor. So I've got some questions coming in, but just use the chat box to give me any questions. There's a couple that have been repeated. So there's a couple of people on here returning to work after quite a long period out of work. Would you have any sort of advice for how people might manage that?
Well, I think one of the things is that people I think particularly this idea of it's not no, it's not now, it's not no, it's not now. I think often where you think that it's easy to think that you've burnt your bridges with people because they haven't responded to an email or they haven't got back to you the way that you were hoping them to come back to you. So I'd say really, dig deep into your network, and rather than, I think it's easy to concentrate on the new all the time, new contacts, and I think if you're coming back into the industry, it's really good to reconnect and share some of those experiences that you had. I think also the other thing is, I mean, it's really old, and you probably know much more about this than I do, Donna, but I used to use, when I was feeling, because I've had long periods out of work as well, I used to use, there was a brilliant chapter in What Colour Is Your Parachute about identifying transferable skills.
Yeah.
So I would sit there when I was out at work and I'd done X, Y, and Z and not worked. I would use that chapter to identify a way of talking about my periods of unemployment in a way that felt authentically positive to me. And in actual fact, it was much more for me than for employers.
Yeah.
You know, identifying the value of my periods of unemployment was much more useful for me to work through and me to understand. And I'm sure it was good for them as well, but some of them might have seen through it, but that didn't help. It helped me stand proud and stand tall. So I think that's a really good bit of advice if you've been out of work for a while.
Yeah, and I would always say, you know, of course there's the fear, but don't think that tele's moved on a million miles, because it hasn't. There'll be a little bit of tech that's changed that you can pick up. And if you were a good storyteller before you went off, you'll be a good storyteller. If you can make people laugh before you went off, you can still make people laugh, or you can make people care or make people cry. So don't think the whole world has moved on and the tech has all changed, because it sort of really hasn't. And kind of, I would say exactly the same as you. What you've used your period out of work doing will be useful. You've probably watched a darn sight more telly. You might have had caring duties, and you might have mixed with different groups of people. You might not just be mixing with telly people, you might be mixing with different groups of people. So I think kind of value that time you've had away from telly as well, because telly isn't everything. So value what else you've done. There's another question about, what are your top tips on pitching? What are some of the best pitches you've had? What makes a pitch zing and something irresistible to you? What's your top tips on pitching?
I think passion really is really key. I mean, ultimately, a good idea. I think that, you know, I think that I don't know if all commissioners are like this. I used to say that they were all, but after 2.5 years of pitching, I'm not so sure. But, you know, when I was commissioning, and most people I knew, you were willing an idea to be good, because the idea that you'd be sitting there thinking, oh, well, I hope this is a waste of my time, is really not really, it just doesn't make any sense. So remember that actually the commissioners are desperate for you to have good ideas that they want to commission. That's why they're having meetings with you generally. But I think pitches really zing when people are passionate about them, when they're got a really clear through line, when you don't give too much detail in the overview, but you've got all the detail behind you. I think often, particularly people that are pitching to begin with. They want to get all the detail out there, and actually, fact, most commissioners are sitting there with a bigger, wider view. So you need to grab them with how the marketing campaign would work. And I think if you can grab them with how the marketing campaign will work and then take them through the detail, that's a good way. And if it's a good idea and it's a good commissioner, then they'll see that it's a good idea.
I mean, Towie was absolutely groundbreaking in its day, wasn't it? What did you see in Towie that made you go for it?
Ruth and Tony said it was so if I'm really brutally honest, it was a combination of them. So interesting, that completely goes against with what I'm saying about a good idea will be seen, because it was a combination of the exec of Big Brother and the exec of Hollyoaks doing something that was groundbreaking, and that I could see was very much. So I'd been working with Katie and Peter for a long time. They were our biggest shows on ITV2 at the time, and they got divorced, and it was like, holy shit, this is awful. What, you know, like. And we actually did very well out of it, because we went from one huge show to two huge shows for a while until they couldn't stay on the same network together. They weren't able to. So I was really clear in my head that I didn't want to commission something that was just about the names and the title, because I'd fallen foul, and I was right in the centre of their divorce. I mean, it was quite a trying time for me. I felt like Kofi Annan half the time. So I think that what I was really clear on was, here was an idea that was bigger than Mark Wright and Gemma Collins. It was a brand that you could put these people into. So that was the good idea, and then the people making it, because ultimately as a commissioner you're looking for good ideas that you know can be made well, and it's difficult, particularly in a more, we're definitely in a more risk averse age. I think that the who is really big in the mix.
Yeah, okay, that's really helpful. And there's a few questions on here about people swapping genres, and you said you came in sort of current affairs education and you got into comedy and entertainment. There's a lot of people now in the more factual side that want to get that studio experience, especially after we're watching Quiz now. How brilliant is Quiz? But how would you suggest people can cross over into studio? Because quite often, you know, people are just quite snobby about it, or quite black and white, and if you haven't got the experience, you can't get the experience, and it's all chicken and egg. How would you suggest people can sell themselves into some of those studio shows?
I think passion is really important, and opportunity. You know, I had to pay my rent and eat and do all that sort of thing. I didn't have, you know, I had a lot of overheads living in London, so I was. It took me quite a long time, and I had to take jobs that weren't quite right. If I had more money, or my parents had lived in London or something, or somewhere else that I wanted to work, I think I would have been more resolute and waited for the comedy jobs, because it took me a long time to get into comedy. And the way I got from current affairs into entertainment was through quiz shows, which were, at the time, it wasn't what I wanted to do, but it felt like it was much closer to what I wanted to do. And I think I went down a few rabbit holes, if I'm honest, and some of them were more productive than others. You know, like we used to make, on Action Time, we used to make 6 shows a day of quiz shows, and that definitely gave me a discipline that I use all the time and in studio. But you know, it wasn't the content. I wasn't passionate about that content at the time. That was a real example of being present and just being good at that job and hoping that it was going to lead to somewhere. And you know, I'm lucky to say, and I do think luck's got somewhat to do with it, I'm lucky to say that that it did.
Yeah.
So I think it's about waiting as long as you can, for being passionate, and for taking the opportunities.
Yeah. And there's a question on here that from another ballsy Scot woman, Jerry. It says, you know, we have such a strong work ethic when we work in telly, and now so many of us aren't working. What are your tips for not being defined by your work?
Oh my God, if somebody's got the answer, tell me. No, well, that's not true. That's not true. How do I not get defined by my career? I think it's really, really difficult not to. I mean, and I'm in a particular, you know, I don't have children, so I'm not defined as a mother. So work is really, really huge element of who I am. And I suppose I think I take the elements out of it that really respond to me, like being creative. Actually, when I'm not working, I don't know if anybody's seen these notes for strangers, but the guy puts notes up in all places. Anyway, they're lovely. But he's got one that says "creating clears the mind," and that really helps me know that I'm creative. That's who I am. Whether that's you know, doing the garden as I'm doing at the moment, or you know, commissioning entertainment programs, or developing them, or even setting up the indie. That felt very creative. That's who I am. The job isn't who I am. I used to say when I was a commissioner, people would say you were important, and I'd say no, I'm not. I've got an important job, because you've got to separate yourself from what you do. But I think essentially, I think the reason I find that so difficult to answer is because my best creativity has been in my career. I've made some really lovely things when I've been creative, but they definitely help to centre me. And I think that in these challenging times, that's what we need to just find out, who we are and what centres us.
Okay, that's a really good point. There's just a couple more around programming, and there were 2 or 3 on there. What do you think commissioning will be like when we come out of post-COVID? Do you think we'll be able to do studio shows, reality shows? What shows do you think, when we do get back to work, we'll be able to make and the commissioners are likely to want?
I think we're in a very particular moment at the moment. So the moment that we're in is that half of us aren't working. I mean, I know we're working, we're being creative. And the people that are still working are working like dogs, and so they're not taking any time. They're not able. Certainly no blame on their part. They're not having the time and space to be innovative, and we are not being what's the word? Not getting the sparks necessarily. It's very difficult in this isolation to have the sparks of creativity for innovation. So my hope, and I don't know that it will happen like this, but my hope when we come out of lockdown is that there will be a great period of innovation, whereby we are able to do things differently, and we we may find ways of making programs where we're able to be socially distant. Maybe someday will invent a lens that keeps you 2 meters apart, but creates I'm being stupid when I say that, but I think that although those in work that are really busy might be looking to us for innovation at the moment, I think it's really, really difficult. Really difficult to innovate in such isolated circumstances. But I do think that there will be sparks of imagination flow, and it's been lovely. So you always get something back when you give something. And I've realised that I've just got to concentrate on being creative. That's what I've got to do in order to get through this period. And whatever that creativity is, it will ultimately spark some innovation and inspiration for me. And so thank you actually for asking that question, because actually forcing myself to think it through, I think that we will come through it. I think we'll see. I think obviously people are obsessed with docs at the moment. I think that there'll be a great period of people wanting to chill and laugh a bit more. I think there'll be, hopefully, again, it's a hope, more authenticity. I think that we've come to a point. I think authenticity has been a big move. Phil Schofield coming out, that to me is a moment in TV history, sort of thing.
There's a great question here that says, look, in a period of innovation and the world's on its head, what's the one thing you'd like to change about the TV sector?
Well, with content, I definitely think that I'd like to see authenticity. I think that quite often the old school image of television is that we're creating smoke and mirrors. And in actual fact, I think in the social media age, which obviously has its pros as well as the cons that I've talked about, the ability to be, I know I keep using the word authentic. What's another word for authentic? Real. To be on a level. I mean, I think that we have we're often guilty of looking down on our viewers, and I think that we've all had this potentially life-changing experience together. The idea of us still looking down, I've never done it. It's not, that's not my way. But I have been in situations where I've been made to be guilty of it, and I hope that changes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to ask one more question so we get out on time and we don't lose our signal. So if you want to type some messages to Claire, just put them in the chat box. So Claire, throughout your reign at ITV, you were known for spotting and developing the shows that got the youngs, and in your indie, one of your first commissions was for BBC Three. So as we know, we're all sort of chasing the youngs, the 16s to 34s. That's the holy grail. What's your advice on producing shows that younger audiences are attracted to?
Well, I think again, it's looking straight into the eye of viewers. I think things that that's an interesting question, because I think that often I think young like raw, I think young like new, I think young like risky, I think young like innovative, young like things to be for themselves. So all those things, they've got nothing to do with actual content. They've got to do with tone and vibe and everything. And And I still like that stuff. I mean, I can't say that I like, you know, necessarily all the subject matter of what's made for millennials at the moment, but that the it being for them, I think, is what's totally important, because I think that we think, you know, it's interesting talking about Pop Idol. Pop Idol is so last generation. You know, that was that generation's excitement, you know, new, radical, innovative, scary, all that. That you know, there's nothing scary about X Factor now. When we did Pop Idol, it was properly sticking two fingers up at the music industry. That's why it was so successful. You know, X Factor has become the music industry. Therefore, no shit, it isn't getting young viewers in the way that it once did. I mean, it's still a brilliant show, but it's not got those new, innovative, scary, whatever the other things I said. I said 5 things. I can't remember.
Raw. I'm listening to you. Right, that has been fantastic, Claire. Thank you so much. And thank you to Claire for offering to do this, because she said one of the things she wants to do now is inspire a different generation. And from all the comments, that's the word that keeps coming up, inspiring. So that's really great. It's been a brilliant session. Thank you, Claire. And if people get some inspiration and band together as a result of this, come back and let us know, because it'd be great to keep that going. So thank you for joining us. Hope we see you at some other sessions. And thanks, Claire. Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.